Hello, this is the end of our first week, the 7 days after we planted the flats. We're going to take a look at the field and see what we've got. There are some bare spots where we will have to reseed, and I'm glad I saved out, about 5 pounds of seed so that we can fill in the bare spots. So let's take a look at what the flats field is like. This is the way the field looks. You'll see there are some areas of green, quite a few actually. For some reason at the far end of the field, the flats is perfectly broadcast, it's perfectly healthy and it's growing, and that's really our best area, and that was sort of the throwaway part of the field because I put all the work here in the front. What you'll see is that there's a nice carpet of green at the far end. That's what we want the entire field to look like. So we're going to be working on broadcasting more seed here in the front to fill in the gaps. And there are unfortunately quite a few gaps here. But we're not going to use special effects to fill it in. We're going to show you the way it is, and because this is what any grower has to deal with. Mother Nature doing her thing, whether it's a jelly washer or drought. We're going to show you the actual flats field as it is. You'll see there are areas of flats coming up, and that there are other areas that are completely barren. And these are the areas that we're going to be reseeding. If we don't reseed, there's going to be a great problem with weeds later on. And even though we spray, I'd much rather have the weeds choked out as much as possible by the flats rather than using a lot of herbicide. Here we are at the far end of the field. What you'll notice is the flats is evenly spaced. This is where the broadcasting did its thing appropriately. The flats itself is about 1 inch tall. Only the very first proto leaves, the cotyledons, are up now. What we'll be waiting for this coming week is looking for the first true leaves to come up. What you'll also notice are the non-flats plants, the grasses and the broadleaf weeds are already coming up. We won't be able to spray until the flats is about 4 inches tall. It needs to have some strength and some maturity to survive the herbicides that we put on. But I am keeping an eye out to see exactly where the problem spots are. And we typically have a problem with both grasses, native grasses, and broadleaf weeds. Here we are near the lower edge of the field as the water came down in sheets across the field from the hillside. It washed a lot of the flat seed down into a sort of a trough-like area here. So this is heavily concentrated with flats. We'll have to see how good it is. But in our experience, when the flats is too close together, as this really is too close together, it gets spindly and doesn't really grow as tall as it would if it were spaced out. I like to have 1 flats plant for every square inch of land. And you can see we probably have 5, 6, 8, maybe even 10 flats plants per square inch. So they're going to be choking each other out, a lot of competition for the available food and nutrients and water, and it's not going to make a very healthy plant. So what we're going to be doing now is broadcasting the rest of the flax seed. It will be 1 week younger than the rest of the field, but at the end of the 8-week growing cycle, that really should not be a significant difference in the maturity of the plants as well as the maturity of the seed between the two different crops. What we're going to do is come back in a week and we're going to see how things look then, so stay tuned, take care. Hello, it's June 22nd, 2 weeks after we planted the flax. We're going to check the flax today. We're going to look for several things. We're going to see how tall it is. We're going to check the seed dispersal to see how evenly I sowed the seed and how evenly the seed is coming up. Now remember, last week we replanted some of the bare spots. So this week we're going to see how those spots are coming out and get an idea as to what we can expect from the field in general. We'll also be looking out for those pesky weeds to see how they're coming up as well. So let's take a look at what we've got. Those are our flax ducts. We have a pair, a male and female over there, of Muscovy ducts. They love sitting on that old log. Now the flax field itself is right adjacent to the stream, so that really helps us in terms of keeping the field wetter, damper, the soil, than it would be if it were one of our higher upper fields. What you'll see is that the flax is pretty evenly dispersed. At the far end of the field by that island of rubble in the middle, you'll see how green it is, intensely green, how tightly together the plants are. It's really like a carpet down at that end. Just the side of it is, from that little swale, that little gully, is where we replanted. And you can see that flax is coming up there as well, though perhaps not as tightly sown as the far end of the field. As you get closer to where we're standing, you can see that it's fairly evenly dispersed. The areas where the flax was washed down into some gullies is very thick, really too thickly sown, but that's just the way Mother Nature created that mess with the intense rain, near floods we had. But everything else looks pretty good. The areas that we reseeded last week are growing now. And if we're looking for weeds, which we always do, or grass, both grass and weeds, the field looks pretty good so far. We are not going to be able to weed or spray for weeds until the flax is about 4 inches high. It needs to be strong enough to withstand the stress of the herbicides, even though the herbicides are specifically prepared for flax. And they don't kill the flax, but they do stress it. This row of flax plants are among those that were seeded last week. So these are just a week old. They still have just the cotyledons, the proto leaves coming up. But if we move over here, what you'll see is that the true leaves of the flax plant are coming up, and these, which are now 2 weeks old, are, I'd say, about 3.5 inches tall here. When I said the flax needed to be at least 4 inches high, I may even go back to 6 inches before we spray it. It would probably be another week or two. I want to make sure the flax is strong enough to withstand the stress of the spraying. But what you'll note is that the leaves are starting to come out from the 2-week-old flax, and the flax that is 1 week old, you can see the buds coming up. Perhaps you can see the buds coming up from the center of the cotyledons, those proto leaves. Now the soil itself, we'll check the soil to see. We've had some showers, not heavy rains, but we have had showers in the past several days, so the soil is definitely damp. We don't have to worry right now about watering, though we will be able to irrigate. If it goes longer than a week without rain, this year we're going to be ready to water the flats and keep it growing as tall as we possibly can get it. This is the first year we've taken advantage of that possibility. In previous years we've been dependent upon the rains, and some years it's worked and some years it hasn't. Last year definitely did not work. So we want to make sure this year that the flats has enough moisture so that it will grow to its tallest, fullest potential. So here we are at the end of the second week. We're going to come back next week at the third week and see what we've got. So we'll see you then. It's week number 3. We planted our field 3 weeks ago today. It's the last Wednesday in June, and we're going to see what we've got. Unfortunately, what we have is a great pile of weeds coming up, but let's check it out. So here's the field. What you'll see is that the flats is a different color green than the broadleaf weeds. The broadleaf weeds are very distinctive and they are obvious. So next week we're going to be spraying. The flats is only about 3 to 4 inches high now, and I want to make sure it's maybe 5 to 6 inches tall before we start to spray. The spraying is stressful. It does not kill the flats, as we've said before, but it will stress the plant, and the taller the flats, the better it will be. So here we are down in the field. The flats here, as I said, is maybe 3-4 inches tall, maybe even 5 for the taller ones. But you can see how the broadleaf weeds are really coming in. I don't know what type of weed this is, but we will definitely be getting rid of it next week. Until then, the flats is on its own. We had a very nice soaking rain last night. We've been averaging rains every 4 or 5 days, which is good. If we do go for 7 days without rain, then we're going to start irrigating. But so far, we haven't had to worry about that. So this is it for 3 weeks of our flats field. Next week, as I said, we're going to be spraying, and we'll show you how we spray. And then we'll look at the field and see the results of the spraying. So that's it for now. Join us next time.